I don't think anyone grows up wanting to be a trucker. When adults asked in school, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" I always said, a ballerina. What no one tells you when you're young and full of dreams is that those dreams aren't free. In fact, college is so expensive, I feel like you should be able to sue. Hundreds of thousands of dollars, just for the chance to be great? With how much it costs, college degrees should come with the guarantee of a kick-ass career when you finish. Anyway, my college grant started running out. I took a year off to save money to finish off my career to pursue those dreams in dance. Luckily for me, my father worked as a trucker and got me a job working for the company he worked for without much issue. And I'm not gonna lie, at first, the job totally sucked ass. I'm a 5'4" woman who, although wasn't skinny or small, looked sweet and innocent. Getting people to take me seriously when we first met was always a losing fight, but trying to get a bunch of burly men who have driven trucks for decades to take me seriously? Damn near impossible. But I had a smart mouth and a take-no-shit attitude that eventually made the other guys lay off me for the most part. It wasn't my dream job, but it paid well, and most importantly, it was a solitary job where the only person I had to depend on most of the time was myself. In a way, I enjoyed what I did. Well, that was until one night about a year into me working as a trucker. I was traveling with a truckload of soft drinks for a fairly short drive, which was still about a 3-hour trip. When I got to the gas station, I made quick work with the manager on site, getting the product into the store and making sure the necessary paperwork was accounted for before I headed for the restroom. When you're stuck on the road for hours at a time, especially when you're a woman with a small bladder, you take advantage of every restroom you come across. I was exiting the restroom stall when I saw a woman at the sink, crying softly as she touched her face. I was confused, and I'll be completely honest, I didn't want to talk to her at all because I didn't do well with tears and heavy emotions. Probably due to the fact I grew up with a dad who drilled into me that crying didn't solve anything, so might as well not even do it. Still, I ended up asking her, awkwardly, if she was okay. It was as if she was waiting for someone to ask her, because before I knew it, she went into detail about how her boyfriend had hit her and stranded her in the gas station, and she didn't have any money or anyone to call to help her get home. Again, I did not want to get involved, but I couldn't let another woman be stuck in the middle of nowhere, late at night where anything could happen. I offered her a ride in my truck, since I was technically headed in the same direction she needed to go in. All the way to her house, the girl talked about her life, her dogs, her hobbies, and anything else that popped into her head. I'm not much of a chatter, but I nodded my head and gave her small answers to make her feel at ease as she rambled on. When we got to her address, I remember instantly being on alert. The neighborhood she lived in was quiet, and all the streetlights were either off or looked to be broken. And when we pulled in front of her house, it looked like it had been abandoned for years. I turned to ask the girl if she was sure this was the right address, when I felt something cold and metal hit my head. "Get out of the truck and give us all your money," said the girl, who had been bubbly and cheerful just a moment before, and now with no humor or sweetness in her tone. That's when I looked out of the truck and saw a guy who also had a gun pointed at me. I had been played. I gave up my wallet to the girl and my phone, but was fortunate that I didn't have all my credit cards in my wallet. But they took my necklace that had belonged to my mother before she died when I was a kid. When they took everything that was of value from me, they jumped into a car that was parked in front of the abandoned house and sped off. I wish I could say that I caught a glimpse of a license plate or called the police, but I was in too much shock, and honestly, I blame myself. I knew better than to get involved, and I still drove this girl, who I didn't know, into a trap. I thought that since she was a petite, innocent-looking girl, she wasn't a threat to me. I made the same assumption that everyone made when they looked at me. I did end up filing a police report when my father found out what happened, but I never got my mother's necklace back. All I know is if I ever see this girl again, I won't hesitate to mess her up for stealing something so precious to me. And if the girl's listening, I just want to say, fuck you. I hope you get what's coming to you. I've been driving my truck since I was 22. Most of my time is spent on the desert roads of California and Arizona. There are specific gas stations and diners that I always stop at, and over the years I've gotten to know the workers at each place. One night, I stopped for coffee at one of my regular diners just outside of Barstow. The food isn't great, but I always appreciated the waitresses there, especially Kathy. She was an older woman with a great sense of humor. I felt like I could always talk with her about anything. She knew more about me than my own family. When I entered the diner, I was the only customer. This wasn't all that unusual, especially at that time of night. Kathy was the only other person there, but I instantly noticed that something was off about her. She didn't smile at me when I entered. In fact, she looked really disappointed to see me, and her eyes kept nervously darting around the room. I sat at my usual table and asked her if everything was okay. She didn't answer my question. Instead, she just angrily asked me what I wanted. I told her that I wanted my usual, which was just black coffee and a plate of French fries. She said, "Yeah, what's your usual?" I couldn't believe it. She'd served me hundreds of times before. She knew what my usual was. I thought she was playing some kind of joke on me, so I just laughed. When it was obvious that she definitely didn't know what I wanted to order, I gave up and told her. Then she walked back into the kitchen without saying anything. I sat there for a while, thinking about my last time at the diner. Had I said something to offend her? I honestly couldn't remember. She was in the kitchen for a while, and I got up to use the restroom. Before I'd reached the door, Kathy ran out of the kitchen screaming, "Don't go in there!" I asked her why, and she said that it was out of order. I didn't understand why she had such an intense reaction, though. It felt like she was hiding something, and I needed to find out what. I said that I just needed to wash my hands and started to open the door. She ran across the room and jumped on my shoulders. "Don't go in there!" she screamed over and over. Kathy was probably half my size, but she seemed weirdly strong. I tried to shake her off me, but she wouldn't let go. I wasn't about to fight a woman, so I just froze in place and told her that I was going back to my table. She let me go and stared at me until I sat back down. She looked like she hated me. After a while, she walked back into the kitchen and came back out with my coffee and fries. She didn't leave my table, though. She just stood next to me, waiting for me to take a drink. I raised the coffee to my mouth, but something was off, and I got a gut feeling to just get out of there. So I set the coffee back down, and without even touching my fries, I put some money on the table and told her I wasn't hungry anymore. She didn't say anything. I ran out of there after that, and she stared at me as I left. As I hurried back to my truck, another trucker pulled in. It was a guy named Dan that I'd met many times before. He hopped out of his truck and I warned him about what had just happened in there. He knew Kathy too, so it took him a while to believe me. He said he'd go inside and check it out. I thought about driving away, but I was worried for Dan, so I just sat in my truck and waited. Just 2 minutes later, Dan ran out of the diner in a total panic. I asked him what was wrong, but he could barely speak. He said that he saw Kathy standing alone in the kitchen, but in the back corner there appeared to be a huge amount of blood. She turned to look at him, but he ran out. We both turned back toward the diner and saw Kathy staring at us through the window. The look on her face was pure hatred. I was too shocked to do anything, but Dan dug out his phone and called the police. We stayed in the parking lot waiting. I kept my eyes on Kathy, who still wasn't moving. Then, slowly, she turned and walked away. When the police came, Dan and I told them everything. They went inside and found Kathy lying dead on the floor in the kitchen. Then they checked out the bathroom and found another body of an unknown man. To this day, I have no idea why Kathy killed herself and why she'd assumingly tried to kill me. It didn't make any sense. All I know is that the woman I saw that night wasn't the woman that I'd known all these years. Something had happened to her, and I'll never find out what it was. I've been a trucker for the better part of my life, and I've seen some strange things on these long-haul journeys. But there's one night that still gives me the shivers. It was a cold, dark Thursday night, with rain pounding the windshield and wind howling like a banshee. I was in the middle of nowhere, right in the heartland of the United States. My truck rumbled along, the wipers slapping back and forth to fend off the relentless rain. It was so dark I could barely see a few feet ahead of me, and the road was slick as snot. The radio played these old classics, but even the familiar old tunes couldn't shake the eerie feeling that hung in the air. I was alone on that desolate highway, not a soul in sight. Then, the CB radio came to life, a crackling voice breaking through the static.
Mayday! Mayday! This is Truck 14! I need help! I'm in some deep trouble out here, over!
My grip tightened on the wheel as I listened to the desperation in the voice on the other end.
This is Truck 27, send your message!
The voice rattled, asking if I could help. He said that his truck had hit something in the road, and he felt like it was put there purposefully to bring him to a halt. He told me his location, and when I checked on my GPS, he was only approximately 15 minutes away. I put my foot down and headed toward the location, the rain still pelting my windshield like angry hornets. After what felt like an eternity, I reached the given coordinates. There, on the side of the road, was Truck 14, hazard lights flashing wildly. The door to the cab was open, but I couldn't see anyone else around. I jumped out of my truck, calling out for the trucker of Truck 14, but there was only silence and the howling wind. I approached the abandoned truck, the engine still running, and a steaming cup of coffee left in the cup holder. It was as if the driver had just up and vanished. Something was definitely off. I pulled out my cell phone, which thankfully now had enough reception to make a call, so I dialed 911 and explained the situation. They promised to send help, but in the darkness and the rain, I had this sinking feeling that something just wasn't quite right, and started to fear that I was the target for an ambush. As I walked back towards my truck, the darkness seemed to close in around me, and the only sounds were the raindrops splattering on the pavement and the soft creaking of my rig. And then, something caught my eye. Through the downpour, I saw the faint, fading taillights of another vehicle in the distance, driving away from Truck 14's location. But I couldn't make out much more than that. It was just a fleeting glimpse. Finally, the police arrived. They combed the area, but there was no trace of the missing trucker. The officer questioned me, and I told them everything. They assured me they'd keep searching, but in my gut, I knew this wasn't a regular missing person case. The truck was untouched. Stories from other truckers have since reached my ears, whispers at the truck stops about strange occurrences on that very stretch of road. They say that some truckers have disappeared without a trace, leaving only their abandoned rigs behind. I can't explain what happened that night. It's a memory that haunts me to this day. I've heard tales of other truckers seeing mysterious figures on the road, unexplained phenomena, and strange lights. Some believe it's a place where the supernatural and the mundane intersect, where the road keeps its secrets hidden. Not me. I'm a little more level-headed than that. I believe it was a real kidnapping, but I'll never know for sure. One thing that doesn't make sense to me is the trailer was untouched. No signs of a break-in, and it appeared as if all the cargo was still there. So I know it wasn't your everyday robbery, and what happened to the trucker? Well, I guess we'll never know. So if you're a trucker, or even if you're not, be careful driving those long stretches of road in the middle of nowhere, as you never know what might be lurking in the darkness. So drive safe, and keep those doors locked and those lights on.